In the landscape of interfaith dialogue in Indonesia, it's rare to find such a deep and open discussion about the foundations of Islamic belief. The dialogue featuring conversations between Dr. Richard and Ustadz Muhammad Nuruddin, a graduate of Al-Azhar, Egypt, specializing in Islamic theology and philosophy, offers invaluable insights into how Islam views truth, faith, and religiosity. Ustadz Nuruddin completed his studies at the Faculty of Usuluddin Al-Azhar from 2012 to 2019, so Ustadz Nuruddin brings a strong academic perspective in answering various fundamental questions about Islam. On the other hand, Dr. Richard asks questions that reflect intellectual curiosity and common doubts held by those outside the Islamic tradition. One central point in this discussion is the rebuttal of the assumption that Islamic creed is forbidden to be studied scientifically or cannot be studied scientifically. Ustadz Nuruddin firmly rejects this view, explaining that throughout his years of studying creed, Ustadz Nuruddin has found that Islam has strong rational foundations. According to the perspective Ustadz Nuruddin presented, Islamic creed can be proven rationally and has a valid scientific basis. This differs from the view that simplifies faith as something purely subjective without a rational basis. Ustadz Nuruddin emphasizes that in the Islamic tradition there is no such thing as dogma in the sense of belief without evidence. On the contrary, faith must always be based on knowledge. The Islamic tradition even questions the faith of someone who merely follows without a basis of knowledge. This shows that Islam prioritizes an approach that can be tested together, whether concerning God, prophethood, or other unseen matters. The discussion then moved on to a fundamental question: how to prove the existence of God. Ustadz Nuruddin uses a systematic approach, starting with defining the nature of the object to be proven. God, according to him, is non-sensory or metaphysical, so the proof must use rationality, not empirical observation. The main argument used is the law of causality or cause and effect. This principle is universally accepted. Every effect must have a cause. When this universe is said to have begun and have a beginning, then logically there must be a primary cause behind its existence. Let's think about it. If we see a building that wasn't there before and then suddenly it's there, logically we would ask, who built it? The same principle applies even more strongly to the universe, which is far more complex than just a building. So, a classic question often comes up: who created God? Actually, this question contains a logical flaw because it asks about the creation of something that cannot possibly be created. If God were created, then he would not be God, but rather a creation. Ustadz Nuruddin illustrates this using the analogy of a camera. For example, this camera can only turn on if it depends on another camera, and then that camera depends on another, and so on. Therefore, there must be one entity that does not depend on anything else for the system to work. Dr. Richard posed another interesting question, as follows: why does God never appear physically? If that happened, perhaps all debates about his existence would be over. Ustadz Nuruddin said that question is a very deep one. The answer also requires a philosophical explanation because there is great wisdom behind God's invisibility. First, God is fundamentally different from limited nature. If God were to manifest himself within the dimensions of nature, then he would become limited and subject to natural dimensions, which clearly contradicts his perfect nature. Something that is limited is not worthy of being called God because the existence of God is a perfect existence and does not depend on anything else. Second, there is wisdom in not appearing directly. This allows humans to be honest with their own rationality. The Quran itself mentions if God willed, all humans would surely believe, but God wants humans to be free to choose. This freedom allows humans to use the intellect, conscience, and 5 senses that have been bestowed upon them to make their own choices. God sent prophets as guides but did not force anyone to believe. This approach is more noble and meaningful for human civilization than if everyone were forced to believe without choice. Responding to the question of why there are many religions while God is only one, Ustadz Nuruddin offers a perspective that might be somewhat unique. According to Ustadz Nuruddin, the religion sent down by God is actually only one, namely Islam. Prophets from Adam to Muhammad all brought the same religion in terms of creed, which is monotheism, although they differed in Sharia or practical rules. In the hadith found in Sahih Bukhari, it is mentioned, "The prophets are like brothers from the same mother. Their mother is one, but their laws are different." This illustrates that the core of religion, which is monotheism, is the same, while its practical rules are adapted to the context of time and place. The existence of diverse religions today is due to human creativity in seeking the transcendent, a long historical process, as well as human freedom to think and create. However, to determine what is true, a foundation of rationally valid evidence is needed.
Holistic perspective. The connection between faith and good deeds truly offers a holistic view. A very interesting discussion came up when Dr. Richard asked, which is more important, faith or good deeds? Ustad Nuruddin stressed that both are equally important and cannot be separated, like two sides of the same coin. Faith manages our vertical relationship with God, while good deeds manage our horizontal relationship with other beings. In the Quran, the word believing is always paired with good deeds, because they complete each other. What's interesting is the analysis of non-Muslims who do good deeds versus Muslims who have faith but do bad things. From a human perspective, those who do good are certainly more praiseworthy. However, from a religious perspective, faith in God remains fundamental because He is the one who gives us the blessings of life and the ability to do good. Ustad Nuruddin used the analogy of an employee who doesn't acknowledge their boss, even though they receive a salary. Even if their performance is good, there's still a basic problem in that relationship. God's justice in judging. Well, one of the most enlightening parts was the explanation of God's justice in punishment. Ustad Nuruddin stressed that not all non-Muslims will go to hell. The message reaching them, yes, that's really important. A person can only be held accountable after the call to faith has truly reached them in the right way. The ability to understand is also crucial. People who are unable to think or grasp the invitation, they will not be punished. The clarity of delivery is super important. If the picture of Islam that reaches someone is flawed or wrong, for example, through extremist groups, then that person hasn't really received the true message. Those who will truly be punished are those who have received the message clearly, are able to understand it, but still arrogantly and proudly reject it after knowing the truth. Transgender and Islamic law. Well, there's also a contemporary issue about transgender people and Islamic law that was discussed here. Ustad Nuruddin explained that in worship, a person is bound by their original gender. But instead of judging, he suggested a wise and gentle approach through guidance and awareness. To avoid practical problems in worship, Ustad Nuruddin suggested that people experiencing this should focus on worship that isn't limited to rituals in holy places. Because in Islam, working patiently and sincerely is also a form of worship. Education and change? It's like planting seeds of goodness. Responding to Dr. Richard's disappointment about people returning to bad habits after Ramadan, Ustad Nuruddin gave very wise advice. Humanity's job is to spread goodness like planting seeds. When they grow, well, that's up to Allah. Disappointment often comes when we have expectations that go beyond our authority. Our real job is to convey and educate, not to force immediate change. Even the prophets, their only job was to convey, not to force. Well, this approach gives inner peace to educators and preachers because they focus on what they can do, which is to convey well without being burdened by results that are truly beyond their control. Criticism of the peasantry education system. At the end of this discussion, we talked about the phenomenon of santry who, misbehave after leaving the peasantry. Ustad Nuruddin analyzed that this might be due to an education system that is too strict and doesn't match the child's developmental stage. He also criticized the practice of putting young children into peasantry with very strict rules, even though that age is actually a time for play. The right education model should follow the pattern taught by Allah, where children are not burdened with religious obligations because it's simply not their time for that. When children are forced to study seriously during a time when they should be playing, they often express that desire to play in adulthood, which can lead to deviant behavior. Conclusion. Enlightening dialogue. This dialogue between Ustad Muhammad Nuruddin and Dr. Richard shows how religious discussions can be polite, scholarly, and deep. Some important points that can be taken away are as follows. 1. Islam has a strong rational foundation that can be scientifically proven. 2. The existence of God can be logically proven through the law of causality and valid philosophical arguments that make sense. 3. God's justice is perfect. No one will be punished without a clear and fair reason. 4. Religious diversity does not negate the truth of Islam, but shows human freedom in seeking truth. 5. Religious education must be adjusted to developmental stages, so it's not counterproductive. 6. Interfaith dialogue should be conducted with mutual respect and based on rational arguments. Conclusion. This dialogue provides an example of how religious discussions can be constructive, where each party can learn and deepen their understanding without losing their own identity. This is a model that is very much needed in an increasingly diverse and complex society.